Welcome to video number 3, the big secret. This is it. This is my big secret. After you see this video, you're not even going to need the course. I'm kidding, of course. But this is going to kind of sum it all up in terms of what I've given you so far in the previous 2 videos and understanding how the formula, the sales minus payments equals zero formula comes together. First, in the last video, I gave you an exercise to do. I asked you to sketch out your distribution or your sales channels and your payment methods and how all that eventually flows into the bank accounts. And I suggested you could do it with pen and paper. You could do it with a flow charting tool. And then I mentioned to you that in this video I was going to show you how I sketch it out using a tool that I love to use called the brain. It's sort of perfect for this kind of thing. So let's take a look at my screen and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, so here it is, the e-commerce accounting workflow. And by the way, in the video's description, there's going to be a web version of this that you can click on so you can interact with it a little bit and get an even closer look at what I've sketched out here. It's a web version, so it's not quite as rich looking as this, but it's close. So I'm going to expand this out to what's called the Plex, right? So you can see exactly how I've got this laid out. So I just kind of headed it off with the e-commerce accounting workflow, and then I've got the section for sales channels, and you can see as an example I've shown you I've got Amazon, Shopify, and then your website, whatever that might be done with. It could be WooCommerce, right, if it's not Shopify or something else. Okay. Now, as I click on each of these sales channels, we'll see the different payment methods that it might connect to. So on the website, let's say I just have Stripe. Okay. Let's go over to Shopify for a second, where I have Amazon Pay, right? We'll talk about that. PayPal or Shopify payments, and PayPal really should be connected to the website as well, because most websites are going to probably take PayPal and Stripe. So you saw, that's why I like the brain. It's really easy to kind of quickly make those connections. So now under the website, whatever shopping cart, I have PayPal and Stripe. Amazon is its own payment method, Amazon Pay, which funds directly into the bank account. But then you saw under Shopify, I also had Amazon Pay because Amazon got smart and Shopify got smart, and so they offer you a way to collect payments from customers in your Shopify website via Amazon Pay. Now, throughout this course, you're going to hear me talk about the fact that I strongly discourage using Amazon Pay on Shopify only because it makes a mess in the accounting. At the same time, if you're the accountant serving the e-commerce client and the e-commerce client assures you that accepting Amazon Pay increases sales, then I'm not going to argue with that. I'll deal with the accounting complexity. In short, what happens is you've got a sale on Shopify where its payment processes through and gets included in your Amazon settlement report. And that situation right there lends itself a little too easily for duplicating a sale or a payment in there, right? Because it's showing up in 2 different places. So that's why I discourage it, is because it can be very messy. So under Shopify, we've got the 3. Shopify, interestingly enough, last time I checked, does not accept Stripe as a payment method. So as of this recording, as far as I know, we've got Amazon Pay, PayPal, Shopify payments. There's a couple others. In the course, I link you to a page where you can review all the different sort of payment methods that Shopify offers, right? And so if I go into, let's say, PayPal here, and then let's go one step further down to the bank account, right? Because ultimately, all these payment methods clear into the bank account, right? So I'll click on the bank account, and let's bring this down a little bit. And so you can see, let me also make this a little smaller so you can see more of the details, right? So you see how these are all the different payment methods regardless of which sales channel, right? Because at this point, we kind of, in the accounting workflow, we kind of forget about where the money originated. It doesn't matter. It went from a sales channel into one of these payment methods, and then we have to deal with it at this level and clear it out from the payment methods into the bank account. At each of these levels, everything has to reconcile, right? The bank account, of course, reconciles to its monthly statement based on, among other things, the net amounts that clear in from these different payment methods. Each of these payment methods, PayPal actually gives you a monthly statement you can reconcile to, so it works a lot like a bank account, even though it's not truly a bank account. But it works like one, so you can actually reconcile this. For something like Stripe, you can actually reconcile it to 0. Every month, you're just going to put in a reconciliation or start a reconciliation in QuickBooks, and you're going to put 0 in as the ending balance and reconcile to that. I'll explain that a little bit more when we switch over to the QuickBooks part of this, right? And then each of your sales channels are also going to reconcile to 0, right? Amazon gives you the biweekly settlement, right? So Amazon, you're actually going to reconcile to the net amount that landed in your bank account. Okay, so that you don't get a statement, but you get the biweekly settlement, and you're going to use that settlement's ending or net deposit amount and kind of reconcile to that, right? Then you take something like the Shopify sales clearing, and this has to zero out because the sales come in, and then sales minus payments equals 0, right? So it helps to have it sketched out like this and really see the flow that I'm now going to show you, how that works and how it gets set up here in QuickBooks Online. Okay, so let's look at the chart of accounts. I'm going to go over to accounting here and chart of accounts, and you're going to see the setup. Of course, in the full-fledged course, I actually walk you through the creation of all this and how to set it up. For the purposes of the mini course, I'll walk you through after setup, exactly how it's structured. And so you can see we're in the banking section. These are all bank accounts. So here's our actual operating account, right? And I put that under bank accounts. This is one of my clever ways, since I don't like to use account numbers, of getting this to show up at the top, right? So I call it bank accounts because then alphabetically this is going to come before the other major sections, which, as you can see, are payment processors and sales channels. And of course, I have the appropriate sub-accounts within each, right? I have PayPal and Stripe, and I have Amazon, eBay, Shopify, and then WooCommerce Clearing if we're using WooCommerce as our shopping cart. Now, important to note, you can't see this that clearly looking at this from this screen from the chart of accounts, but one of the reasons I like setting it up this way is when I run the balance sheet, each of these sections is going to get subtotaled. So I can see very clearly how much money is sitting in my sales channels, how much money is sitting in my payment processors, which really means that it's in transit into the bank account. Theoretically, as of the end of any given month, whatever money is sitting in PayPal or Stripe is going to land in my bank account within the first 2 or 3 days of the new month. Right, so I like seeing my balance sheet structured this way because it really gives me a clear picture of not just how much cash I have coming in, but kind of where it sits on the sort of timeline of how that money actually flows eventually into the bank account. So this is the basic structure, and as I said, all of these accounts get reconciled every month. This gets reconciled to its statement. The payment processors, PayPal has its own statement with an ending balance you can reconcile to. Stripe, you're going to use 0 as the ending balance. They do have kind of a statement, but I don't recommend using it, and I'll get into that in the course in the lesson that I have on Stripe. There's a reason I don't like using their statement, and instead I just run my own activity and like I said, reconcile it to 0. And then the sales channels, as I explained a few minutes ago, Amazon, you're going to reconcile to the net deposit that you've received. eBay, you're going to reconcile to 0 every month. Shopify, you'll reconcile to 0. And of course, WooCommerce Clearing would also be reconciled to 0. In other words, anything that doesn't have a statement with an ending balance you can reconcile to, you're just going to reconcile it to 0. And I'm going to show you an example of what this looks like so you can visualize exactly, why this works and works so beautifully. So I'm going to go into my reports here, and we'll actually run the balance sheet. Okay, I've got that here. And let's just take a look at eBay clearing. So this is 0 right now, but that doesn't mean that there's no activity inside of it. In fact, I'll show you exactly what's happening here. So on the same day, and again, I just, as I mentioned in the last video, I'm showing you one example of one sales channel so that you can see how this flows. And then just imagine that if I have 100 sales, the concept's going to follow. It's going to work exactly the same way, right? So here I have 2 sales receipts. I use sales receipts in both transactions for both the sale itself and the payment, which happened to be PayPal in this case, right? So let's look at the sales receipt first, okay? And what I have here is a generic customer called eBay Sales, right? And it's a sales receipt with the product, right? So in this example, we're tracking the inventory in QuickBooks Online. If we weren't, that's a different story. We would do things a little differently. But basically, you've got a sale of a watch for $150. Now, this item is linked to 2 things. It's linked to the income account for my watch sales, and it's also linked to because it's an inventory part, it needs to get linked to a cost of goods sold account, quote unquote, right? But instead of using the cost of goods sold account, I use the appropriate sales clearing account for eBay. So it clears into sales clearing instead of into, some cost of goods sold account. Okay, because all I want to do right now is capture the sale and capture the offset to that in the clearing, so I can clear it out with whatever payment method I need to clear it out with, right? And the idea here is, as I've said, I don't necessarily know when I'm recording the sale and setting up the system for that which payment method is going to be used. So I have to create a system that accounts for all possibilities. That's in short what we're doing here. Okay, so I'm going to leave without saving. And then, lo and behold, the payment was made via PayPal, so it's a separate sales receipt. And when I click in here, I have two different items. This is the payment method item that I've created that effectively is configured to pull the money out of the eBay sales clearing and into PayPal, right? So it's going to take the whole $150 sale, the gross sale, out of the sales clearing, and it puts it into the PayPal account. This item is configured to make that happen. Again, this is all covered in more detail in the course. And then the processing fee. I have to deduct the $4.50 processing fee, and this is all getting deposited into my PayPal account. Okay? So that is how we then get to what you'll see here in this clearing account. So we have the sales minus payments equals 0. Right? And the only difference in the real world from what you're seeing here is that you're going to have a whole bunch of sales, and then you're going to have probably some, especially with something like eBay, you're going to have some, or PayPal rather, you're going to have some large chunks, or I'm sorry, we're in the sales clearing phase and talking about the payment clearing out of sales clearing into PayPal. So at this level, at this stage, you're going to see kind of one for one. You're going to see all the sales come in, and you're going to see the payments clear right out against that. So when I go to reconcile this, I check them off against one another, and it's always going to zero out perfectly. Okay? So that is, in essence, how this workflow actually works in QuickBooks Online. So the initial sales receipt is just for the sale, and it clears into eBay clearing. And then the PayPal payment is its own separate sales receipt using a payment item that clears it from the eBay sales clearing into the PayPal clearing. So here's your homework for this lesson. Assuming, if you haven't done it already, then go ahead and sketch out your sort of mapping that I described of your sales channels and all your payment methods. Make sure you got that done first, because as I've said, that's going to inform how you set up the chart of accounts. And then based on what I just showed you in this video, what I want you to do is, assuming you have access to a company in QuickBooks Online, either your own or your clients, get in there and start setting up the accounts the way that I've just shown you they get set up, and consistent with your situation, whichever sales channels you have, whichever payment methods you have that need to get set up. Get your chart of accounts set up, and what you could even do is go through the exercise of recording one sample transaction, start with the sale, go and then record the payment, and make sure you can get, an example like the one I showed you with the $150 sale through eBay. Make sure you can get that to clear out, to zero out. Make sure you can get things, lined up so that you can do that reconciliation. Now, I'll admit there's one thing I didn't show you because that's in the course, and it's just too much to go into here in the mini course, but you'll have to understand how to set up those items that we used on those sales receipts. But if you follow along what I described, you should be able to figure it out and figure out how to map those items. But like I said, once you get into the actual course, I promise you I definitely walk you through the setup of all of those items step by step to make sure it is 100% crystal clear. If for some reason you don't have any kind of access to a QuickBooks Online company that you can play with, then I have one of two suggestions for you. My preference would be it's worth it for you to spend the money on paying for a QuickBooks Online subscription so that you can play around with this and have your own little sandbox so you can play around and test these things and make sure that you understand how to get the workflow set up. Better to do it there and troubleshoot it there before you go into a live file for one of your clients. If for whatever reason that's not an option, or you just don't think you want to pay for a test company, then you can always do a Google search for QBO Test Drive, and you can play around with their sample company. Just fair warning, whatever you're going to do, you have to do in one sitting, because as soon as you close that out, then it resets, and so it's not going to save anything that you've done in there. So it's not ideal, but if all else fails, if you really don't have a way to access your own QBO company, then that option is certainly available to you so that you can at least have a way of practicing what you're learning right here. A lot of what I've covered and focused on so far for you has to do with the revenue or the sales cycle, meaning we've looked at how to record the sale of your products and how to handle tracking all of that, sales, payments, everything funding into your bank account, sales minus payments equals 0. And I've touched on inventory a little bit, but in the next video, I'm going to give you the complete plan. So I'm going to sort of recap what we've covered so far in terms of the revenue cycle, but then we're going to talk a little bit more deeply than we have so far about the inventory workflow and that whole process and how that all really completes the whole picture so that at the end of the day, you can run a profit and loss statement and see exactly how much you've made on any of the inventory that you've now sold. Thanks so much for watching this video, and keep your eyes peeled for the next lesson coming soon to an inbox near you.